Hello, my dear mastermind. They lined up every expert they could find, people with titles, decades of experience, polished theories, whole libraries of rules they swore the world ran on. They stood there confidently, almost amused, waiting to lecture you about why your vision could never happen. You could see it in their eyes, the quiet arrogance, the polite disbelief, the subtle smirk that said we know better. But what none of them understood is that you were not following their rules to begin with. You were not trying to impress them. You were not hoping for permission. You were already moving while they were still preparing sentences. They did not realize you were not debating possibilities, you were executing realities. And before the first expert even stepped forward to speak, before the first pointer, the first warning, the first limitation left their mouth, you had already done the thing they said was impossible. You did not wait for approval. You did not wait for guidance. You did not wait for reassurance. You just moved, because somewhere deep in you, in a place no expert could measure, there is a force that does not respond to doubt, a force that does not slow down for statistics, a force that does not bow to probability. While they were running calculations, you were running instinct. While they were predicting outcomes, you were creating them. While they were trying to understand the path, you were already at the destination, knocking on the door. And that is what stunned them. Not the result, not the success, but the speed, the certainty, the silence. You moved in. They expected hesitation, but you acted like someone who already saw the ending from the beginning. They expected fear, but your calm unsettled them more than any boldness could. They expected you to struggle, but you walked through the challenge like it was written for you. Experts fear one thing the most: someone who outpaces their predictions. And that is what you are. A living contradiction to their formulas. A reminder that impossible is a word created by people who stop thinking too early. You are the kind of person who makes professionals question their profession, the kind who makes analysts revisit their data, the kind who forces a system to confront the truth. Some minds cannot be boxed, charted, or forecast. Some minds do not wait for the world to agree. They move, and the world follows. So when they stood there with their credentials ready to lecture you, and you showed them results instead of arguments, their faces said everything. Shock, confusion, a silent admission that they misjudged you completely. They thought you needed their guidance. You were already miles ahead. And here is the part that really rattled them. It was not just that you did the impossible. It was how calmly you did it. No grand announcement. No dramatic buildup. No request for validation. You just handled it like it was another task on your list. Like it was normal. Like it was expected. That calmness. It unsettled them more than the outcome. Because only two types of people move like that. The completely unaware or the deeply aware. And you are the second kind. You did not need applause. You did not need witnesses. You did not need anyone to cheer for you. You trusted yourself more than they trusted their entire system. That is what shifted them. They saw someone who was not intimidated by their titles, their history, their hierarchy. Someone who did not shrink when the room got heavy. Someone who did not blink when the pressure got real. They are used to people folding under doubt. They are used to people rewiring their dreams to fit realistic standards. They are used to people needing permission just to believe in themselves. But you You walked in with a kind of self-certainty that cannot be taught in any classroom, a kind they could not measure on any chart, a kind they cannot replicate, cannot bottle, cannot analyze. And that is why the silence after your success was louder than the experts' warnings. They did not expect to watch someone rewrite the outcome in real time. They did not expect your intuition to outpace their logic. They did not expect your instinct to rise above their predictions. You made them question everything they thought they knew about limits. Because the truth is, you do not move with hope. You move with alignment. You do not chase outcomes. You become them. You do not try things, you arrive in them. Most people wait for conditions to improve before they act. You improve the conditions by acting. Most people wait for the world to open a door. You walk through the wall, and what really stunned them was that you never argued. You did not defend yourself. You did not debate. You did not try to convince anyone. You let your work speak. You let your result land. You let their doubt age badly. That is what shifted them the most. The realization that while they were preparing to limit you, you were preparing to surpass them. While they were drafting opinions, you were building proof. While they were waiting to say you cannot, you were already living. I did. That is why they looked unsettled. That is why the room went quiet. That is why their certainty shifted. Because nothing humbles an expert faster than watching someone they underestimated rewrite the entire script before the discussion even begins. And the interesting part, the moment you succeeded, every expert suddenly rewrote their memory. They started pretending they always saw something in you. Like they did not laugh behind closed doors. Like they did not bet against you when they thought no one was watching. But the universe keeps receipts they cannot delete. It remembers the smirks. It remembers the dismissive tone. It remembers the way they tried to box you in before you even had a chance to show your range. And when the truth revealed itself, it did not just reach them, it humbled them. Because deep down, they were not just wrong about you, they were uneasy about the possibility that you might prove them wrong. They did not doubt your ability. They doubted their comfort. They doubted their place in the story once someone like you stepped into your real identity. They doubted the system that crowned them experts. Your win did not just expose their miscalculation, it exposed the limits of their imagination. You did not just dissolve their theory, you made their entire framework irrelevant. And now they are confused, because you were not supposed to rise without their approval. You were not supposed to outperform the blueprint. You were not supposed to surpass people who had a head start, better resources, louder voices, but you did. Quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And here is the part that really unsettles them. You did not even use your full power. They watched you deliver results at 40%, maybe 60% on a good day. They do not even know what your full capacity looks like. And that unsettles them in ways they will not admit out loud. They are replaying every moment they brushed you off, every opportunity they denied you, every time they underestimated your mind, because now they see it clearly. If you could do that under pressure, imagine what you will do when the path is open. Imagine what you will do when you are focused. Imagine what you will do when you stop dimming your light, just to make the room comfortable. That is why they suddenly want to talk. That is why they are suddenly curious. That is why they are circling back with newfound respect. They realize something too late. Someone who can do the impossible without support can do the extraordinary with it. Someone who can rise in silence, can move powerfully in clarity. Someone who can outperform predictions, can rewrite destiny. And you are only getting started. They are finally waking up to a truth you have known for years. Your potential is not something they can calculate. It is something they are forced to witness. And witnessing it is shifting their confidence more than your success ever could. And now look at them, narrowing their eyes at your progress, like they are staring at a shift in their own system. Because nothing about your rise matches their logic. You did not follow their steps. You did not use their map. You did not ask for their approval, support, or guidance. You moved like someone who decoded a language they did not even know existed. That is why they are unsettled. That is why they are whispering. That is why their confidence suddenly feels thinner than their predictions. They thought success only came through the doors they kept closed. You showed them how success rewrites the structure and walks straight through the dust like it belongs there. They thought pressure would make you fold. Instead, pressure activated the part of you they did not want to believe was real. The part that does not run, does not flinch, does not collapse. The part that adapts faster than their doubts can form. The part that sees the whole board while they are still arguing over pieces. It is not that you surprised them. It is that you exposed how small their expectations were. You turned every limitation they placed on you into fuel. You converted their disbelief into advantage without ever lifting a finger. And what truly shifts them is this. They had every advantage and still could not outrun you. They had networks. They had approval. They had confidence built on nothing but loud voices and fragile pride. You had hunger. You had vision. You had a quiet internal surge growing inside you that even you did not fully understand yet. And when that internal surge expanded, the whole room shifted. People stopped checking your potential and started checking their own ceiling. People who once offered you advice now study you like a detailed record. People who once talked over you now lower their voice when you walk in. You did not ask for presence. You became presence naturally. And the more they watch, the more obvious it becomes. Your success was not luck, it was preparation. Meeting the exact moment destiny needed you awake. They waited for your confidence to fade. Instead, theirs did. They waited for your momentum to slow. Instead, theirs paused. They waited for your inspiration to dull. Instead, your clarity sharpened into something they do not have a name for yet. They thought your path was unpredictable. They never realized you were just unpredictable to them because they were never operating at your level. That is the part they will never say out loud, but it is the part they feel every time your name enters the room. Here is the twist they will never admit. Not even to themselves, your rise did not just surprise them, it revealed them. Every excuse they ever made, every limit they ever projected onto you, every prediction they whispered behind closed doors, all of it dissolved. The moment you did the thing they swore was impossible. And now they are scrambling. Not because you changed, but because your growth forced them to confront the truth. They never understood you. Not your silence, not your patience, not your discipline. They mistook your stillness for hesitation. They mistook your humility for weakness. They mistook your strategy for confusion. They did not know you were observing, learning, absorbing, mastering things they did not even bother to look at. You were not behind. You were studying ahead. You were not lost. You were locked in. You were not slow. You were calculating. And now that the results are unavoidable, now that your presence carries a weight their ego cannot lift, they are replaying every moment. They underestimated you like a documentary they never wanted to be part of. You can almost hear their thoughts. How did he do that? What changed? How did we miss it? They did not miss it. They ignored it. Because your potential did not look loud enough. Because your growth did not match their timeline. Because your power did not ask them for permission. They wanted you predictable. But your evolution was built in silence, shaped by challenges, refined by setbacks, strengthened by moments they will never know about. You did not skip levels. You endured every one of them with a mindset they could not measure. And that is why your success feels extraordinary to them. Not because it was instant, but because it was inevitable. And what is truly shifting them now is this simple fact. You did not rise to prove them wrong, but your rise proved them wrong anyway. Every expert, every doubter, every jealous voice, they all underestimated one thing: your capacity to become a version of yourself that even you had not met yet. And now that you are meeting him, the world has to adjust. The room has to adjust. Reality has to adjust. They thought your ceiling was low. They did not know you were building an entirely different floor while they were watching the wrong door. And now you stand here quiet, composed, unbothered, while they scramble to rewrite the story they authored about you, because the truth finally reached them like sudden clarity after a long denial. You were never the underestimated one. You were the unseen variable. The unseen variable. The shift in the pattern. The one factor no calculation accounted for. And the more they replay your moves, the more they realize those were not lucky breaks. Those were strategic shifts born from a mind they never respected enough to study. You did not just evolve. You outgrew the entire ecosystem. They tried to confine you in. That is why they are confused. That is why they are whispering your name in rooms you have not even entered. That is why the experts keep reviewing your decisions like detailed records that do not obey their rules. You dissolved their prediction models simply by being yourself. And now, every moment you were silent. They are starting to understand it was intentional. Every time you held back, they are starting to see it was discipline. Every moment you walked away, that was strategic withdrawal, not fear. You did not run. You regrouped. You did not collapse. You recalibrated. You did not lose, you learned. And those lessons, they built a version of you that no one, not the doubters, not the imitators, not the self-proclaimed strategists could anticipate. They keep asking, how did he get so far ahead? But the real question is, why did they think you would not? You carry resilience they have never tasted. You carry intuition they cannot understand. You carry courage they only pretend to have. You were not shaped by applause. You were shaped by pressure. You were not motivated by validation. You were motivated by purpose, and purpose always outlasts noise. That is why they are unsettled. That is why their confidence shifts every time you enter the room. You do not match their expectations anymore. You influence their perception simply by existing. And here is the quiet truth, the one only you need to hear. Your evolution did not unsettle them because it was fast. It unsettled them because it was undeniable. You did not just rise, you made their entire definition of possible look outdated. Listen closely, because this is the part they will never admit out loud. The real concern did not start when you succeeded. It started when they realized you succeeded in ways they cannot copy, cannot predict, cannot anticipate. They expected you to climb the ladder they built, step by slow step, while they watched from above, amused. Instead, you built your own ladder out of silence, challenges, and self-awareness, and climbed past their entire structure like it was a prop in a game designed for someone else. That is when their energy changed. That is when they stopped laughing and started calculating. But by the time they reviewed every frame of your rise, by the time they replayed every moment you went quiet, every moment you stepped back, every moment you refused to react, they realized something unsettling. Your evolution was not random. It was engineered. They finally recognized the truth they were too arrogant to see. Your silence was not empty, it was filled. While they mistook your stillness for weakness, you were doing the one thing they never had the discipline to do. Study the landscape instead of rushing into it. And now, every move you make feels like it shifts the atmosphere. People adjust themselves when you walk in. Conversations shift. Tones change. The energy rearranges itself around you. Like even the air remembers what they forgot. That you are not just ahead. You are operating from an entirely different layer of reality. They thought you were done. They thought you reached a boundary. They thought they had you limited under expectations, designed to shrink you. But you moved past that narrative with one decision, one transformation, one silent pivot they never saw coming. And here is the part that seals your legacy. Everyone who doubted you is now quoting your discipline, mimicking your mindset, trying to understand your approach like it is a hidden manual only you were allowed to read. They do not want to admit it, but you became the reference point, the unexpected blueprint, the force that reshaped the standard. And while they are still focused on how you did it, you are already shifting into your next evolution, calm, intentional, beyond comparison. So let them speculate, let them analyze, let them whisper your name like a rumor they are hesitant to confirm, because deep down they all know you did not just rise. You changed the entire definition of rising. Hello, my dear masterminds. They brought in 3 different experts to explain what you did. All 3 walked out in silence. Not because they disagreed with each other, but because none of them could explain how it was even possible. The result was real, triple-checked, verified from 6 different angles. The numbers didn't lie. The outcome sat there. Undeniable, final, clean. But the path to it? That made no sense to anyone watching. They retraced every step, compared it against known methods, reviewed timelines, ran models, searched for precedent. Still couldn't connect the dots. This wasn't supposed to work the way it did. Not at that speed. Not with that level of precision. Not without visible strain. Most people leave fingerprints when they move under pressure. Effort leaks, urgency shows. Desperation announces itself. You left nothing, just the outcome. And that's what broke their confidence. Here's what unsettled them most. You didn't reject their system loudly. You simply stepped outside it quietly. And when the result landed, it forced a question none of them wanted to ask. What if the rules they've mastered don't apply to you? They replayed the sequence looking for emotional tells. desperation, overcorrection, panic spikes. There were none, just alignment, movement without noise, precision without performance. That's when the room shifted, because people who understand systems know this truth. When something works without explanation, it means the operator is working from a level the system doesn't track. You didn't beat them by being smarter in the moment. You beat them by understanding timing, restraint, and leverage. Long before the move was made, they saw the result. They couldn't explain the path, and the reason is simple. You weren't performing for analysis. You were executing from clarity. And clarity doesn't leave evidence behind. Once the result locked in, the real work began on their side. Not celebration, not replication, damage control. Because experts don't lose composure when something fails. They lose composure when something works without permission. Quiet meetings followed. Everyone brought theories. Nobody brought certainty. But here's what they didn't see yet. What they were about to discover would force them to question everything they thought they knew about competence. One expert suggested you had an unseen advantage. Another assumed you exploited a blind spot in the process. Someone else called it a rare convergence of factors that wouldn't repeat. They all needed it to be accidental. Because if it wasn't, if you meant to do this, then the gap between what they know and what you see is far wider than they're willing to admit. The implications made them uncomfortable, so they kept circling the same question from different angles. How did you move so cleanly without triggering resistance? How did you bypass friction without forcing anything? How did you land a result that normally demands escalation without escalating at all? And that's when it started to dawn on them. You weren't optimizing for efficiency. You were optimizing for inevitability. You didn't push the system. You positioned yourself where the system moved for you. That's not something frameworks teach. That comes from understanding pressure, timing, and human behavior at a level that doesn't need diagrams. They went back through your past moves next, looking for patterns. Anything familiar to anchor this moment to. Precedent, anomalies, behavioral signatures. What they found deepened the confusion. You've done this before, quietly, consistently. Each time leaving outcomes without obvious struggle. No grandstanding. No narrative control. No aggressive positioning. Just results that land and stay. Repetition rules out luck. And intention, without explanation, is far more unsettling than raw force. They realized they weren't studying a single move anymore. They were studying a mindset. And mindsets don't show up in spreadsheets. They show up in timing, in restraint, in knowing when not to act. You didn't move faster than them. You moved earlier, long before the moment demanded it. By the time they noticed, the advantage was already locked. The result was no longer the mystery. The mystery was you, not your intelligence. Not your resources, your calm. And here's what calm at that level actually means. Something they were about to feel firsthand. Experts are trained to detect pressure. They read urgency in tone, posture, decision speed, behavioral microsignals. You gave them none of it. You didn't rush the moment. You didn't react to obstacles. You didn't even seem invested in convincing anyone. That absence became the loudest signal in the room. Because when someone operates without visible urgency, It means the outcome is already decided in their mind, not hoped for. Decided. They began asking a quieter question now. Not how you did it, but when you knew it would work. Because there's a difference between trying something and executing something you've already tested internally. You didn't gamble, you confirmed. Somewhere before the move was visible, you had already walked the entire path mentally. You knew where resistance would appear. You knew where it wouldn't matter. You knew which reactions were noise and which ones shaped reality. That's why you didn't flinch when the moment arrived. You weren't improvising, you were revealing a decision that had been finished long before anyone else noticed the game had started. This kind of certainty doesn't come from hope. It comes from preparation. Most people never commit to. The kind that happens when no one's watching, when there's no applause waiting, when the only reward is internal alignment. You didn't just plan the move, you lived it mentally until every outcome was mapped, every reaction anticipated, every consequence accounted for. By the time the moment arrived in reality, you had already walked through it a dozen times in private. That's the discipline they'll never put in their reports. And here's where the story takes a turn they didn't expect. Experts struggle with preparation like that. Their world is built on visible inputs and measurable effort. You operate on alignment, on discipline that doesn't need witnesses. They tried to map your thinking, but maps only work when terrain is stable. You had already shifted the terrain. By the time they noticed, every assumption they relied on felt outdated, and what they discovered next changed how they looked at everything. You didn't beat them by outworking them. You beat them by outweighting them, by letting the moment mature, instead of forcing it early. And when it finally arrived, you stepped through without resistance. Patience refined into clarity. Once they accepted the result wasn't an accident, the discomfort deepened, because now the question wasn't about methods. It was about hierarchy. Expertise depends on explainability. Status survives on the idea that knowledge can be transferred, taught, replicated. You challenged that comfort. You produced an outcome without leaving behind a blueprint they could study. Either their models are incomplete, or you're operating from a layer they haven't earned access to yet. They tried to call it intuition, hoping to reduce it to something abstract and harmless. But intuition doesn't repeat with this level of consistency. Yours did. They tried to call it timing, but timing without panic is rare. They tried to call it experience, but experience usually carries weight. You carried calm. And calm backed by results is what forces recalibration. They noticed something else then. You never chased momentum. You let it come to you. While they tracked signals, you tracked leverage. While they debated options, you narrowed direction. While they maximized activity, you minimized exposure. Every decision you made reduced friction instead of increasing it. That's not how most experts are trained. They're taught to act, to intervene, to assert control. You understood something subtler. Control doesn't come from force. It comes from placement. You placed yourself where outcomes converge naturally. Resistance never spiked. Nothing escalated. Everything just settled. The room didn't erupt, because eruptions draw attention. Your result drew acceptance. And acceptance is harder to reverse than shock. But what happened next is what sealed everything permanently. By the time they realized what happened, it was already integrated into reality. The system had adjusted, not loudly, seamlessly. And that's when the respect turned quiet. Not admiration, caution. The kind that changes how people speak around you, how they frame proposals, how they hesitate before assuming anything about your next move. The kind that rewires behavior without announcement. Their focus shifted, not toward the result anymore, not even toward you directly, toward the space around you, because that's where the influence showed up. Decisions nearby began changing without explanation. Timelines adjusted, priorities reshuffled. People acted differently without knowing why. You didn't disrupt the system, you bent it. And systems only bend for two reasons: pressure or inevitability. You used neither visibly. You never demanded attention. You never claimed authority. You let alignment do the work, while others chase visibility. You mastered positioning, while they searched for leverage. You became the point leverage moved around. If they had been watching you instead of the outcome, they might have noticed the shift earlier, but you never signaled it. You didn't posture. You didn't hint. You didn't build suspense. You simply moved when the moment was yours. That kind of restraint rewires how rooms function. It trains people to pause, to second-guess impulses, to consider angles they normally ignore. You didn't dominate by being louder. You dominated by being undeniable. The result stood without defense. And when something stands without defense, it becomes a reference point. From that moment on, every strategy they discuss quietly checks itself against what you already did. Not openly, not crediting you, just internally. A recalibration they can't undo. And here's what that recalibration actually looks like in practice. They don't need to understand how anymore. They understand something more important. You operate from a depth that doesn't require permission. And once that's clear, hierarchy rearranges itself automatically. This is where the story settles into something permanent, not celebration, adjustment. When experts can't explain a result, they stop competing with it. They adapt around it. You became a fixed variable. Not someone to outmaneuver, someone to account for. Your presence alone started influencing decisions before they were finalized. Not because you demanded it, because ignoring you became expensive. The cost of miscalculation suddenly outweighed the comfort of independence. That's not reputation, that's gravitational shift. You didn't win by proving intelligence. You won by demonstrating coherence. Every move you made aligned with the next one so cleanly that resistance dissolved before it could form. Explanation requires friction. You removed it. Once friction is gone, outcomes feel obvious in hindsight. They'll say it was clear all along. That's how people protect ego after being outpaced. But the truth is simpler. You were operating from a level they weren't trained to see, while they analyzed possibilities. You confirmed inevitabilities, while they asked how. You already knew when, and timing is the advantage that doesn't announce itself until it's irreversible. You didn't expose your process because you didn't need to. The result spoke cleanly, completely, and without defense. Here's the quiet truth beneath all of it. You never set out to confuse anyone. You never tried to appear mysterious. You simply refused to perform for understanding. Most people move in ways that beg to be interpreted. You didn't. You moved in ways that worked. And that's what experts couldn't process. But what happens from this point forward is where it gets truly permanent. Experts are trained to analyze signals, not certainty. You gave them certainty without signals, and that short circuits every instinct they rely on. When something succeeds without noise, without struggle, without visible effort, it exposes a gap that can't be filled with more data, only with growth. And growth is what expertise resists when it feels threatened. They'll keep replaying the result, hoping to find the missing step. They won't, because the missing step wasn't external, it was internal. Discipline built quietly, vision refined without witnesses, timing chosen instead of chased. You didn't operate from theory, you operated from alignment. And alignment doesn't leave fingerprints, it leaves outcomes. Clean ones, stable ones, the kind that don't need defending. Long after the analysis fades, the effect remains. Rooms still adjust, decisions still lean, people still hesitate before assuming anything about you. Not because you demanded respect, but because you earned something rarer. Irreversibility. Your last move didn't just succeed. It taught them restraint. It taught them that not everything powerful announces itself. You created certainty. And certainty rearranges hierarchies without conflict. They don't try to predict you anymore. They try to stay out of your way. Because prediction fails when someone understands timing better than ambition. You didn't rush greatness. You waited until it aligned with you. And when it did, it moved cleanly, quietly, and permanently. So what happens from here? The pattern doesn't stop. It deepens. Once someone crosses into this level of operation, every move afterward carries the same signature. Calm, precise, irreversible. You won't need to prove yourself again. The proof is already embedded in how rooms respond to your presence, how decisions pause when you're silent, how certainty wavers when you're absent. And here's what that actually means going forward. The pattern repeats because you're not performing it. You are it. This isn't a strategy you deployed once. This is a frequency you operate from permanently. And frequency doesn't change based on audience. It doesn't adjust for comfort. It simply is. That's why they can predict the what, but never the when. They know you'll move with precision. They just can't map the timing. Because timing at this level doesn't respond to calendars. It responds to alignment. This doesn't fade because it was never built on external validation. It was built on internal coherence. And coherence doesn't degrade. It compounds. Every move you make from this point forward will reinforce what they already sense. That you're not playing for temporary wins. You're establishing permanent positioning. And permanent positioning doesn't need maintenance. It maintains itself through presence alone. The moment when observation becomes irrelevant, when analysis stops mattering, when trying to decode you feels less important than simply accounting for you. They stopped asking how you think. They started asking what happens if they don't align with where you're going. That's when the game changes completely. From resistance to accommodation. From competition to coexistence. From questioning to accepting. You didn't master the game they were playing. You stepped into a position where games stop being necessary. And once someone reaches that layer, every attempt to explain them will fall short. Because the truth isn't something you say. It's something you become. 3 experts tried to explain what you did. All 3 failed. Not because you were complex, but because you were complete. The result stood. The method remained invisible, and in that gap between outcome and understanding, something permanent settled into place. Respect without explanation. Influence without announcement. Power that doesn't need permission. They'll keep studying. They'll keep analyzing. They'll keep trying to decode what makes you different. But the answer won't appear in their reports. Because you don't need explanation. You are the explanation. Hello, my dear mastermind. They're stunned right now, because this was not supposed to happen. Not according to their charts, not according to their predictions, not according to the little blueprint they built in silence, hoping you'd never move beyond the limit of it. For months, maybe years, they studied your patterns like they were prepping for an exam with only one question. How do we stop you? They mapped your habits, tracked your reactions, replayed your setbacks like analysts rewinding tape, thinking that if they memorized your past, they could control your future. Cute idea. Too bad you were never operating from the same timeline to begin with. See, they forgot something important. You were never built from formulas. You were never powered by approval. You were never guided by the predictable emotions they counted on. They thought you'd freeze where others fell, quit where others crumbled, hesitate where others folded. They thought you'd follow the script that everyone else follows when the pressure gets uncomfortable. But while they were writing theories, you were rewriting your entire trajectory. Quietly, secretly, strategically. They ran simulations of every possible move you could make, except the one you actually made. Because the move you made, that was not from logic. That was not from fear. That was not from desperation. That came from a place inside you they never believed existed. A place they could not calculate. A place they could not access. That instinct-level intelligence that activates only when you're pushed somewhere between destiny and unease. It's the mode only certain people unlock. The people who move through heavy seasons others stumble in. The people who rise from influence instead of losing themselves to it. The people who don't just play the board. They shift the whole dynamic when the game's rigged. And that's exactly what you did. You made the one move they told everybody was impossible. The one move they swore you were not capable of. The one move all their models said would never happen. Because people like you do not pull off endings like this. They forgot the part where pressure turns average minds into fog, but it turns yours into precision. They forgot you don't respond to limits. You respond to opportunities disguised as walls. They forgot you're the type who doesn't rush, doesn't panic, doesn't broadcast. You just watch. You just wait. Then you strike once. And when you strike, the whole environment shifts. Right now they're sitting there confused, stressed, rewinding every moment, trying to figure out how you did it. They're checking their data, rereading their notes, questioning their own intelligence, because this kind of move does not come from probability. This comes from someone who was not chasing validation, someone who was not looking for permission, someone who was not afraid of losing anything. Because you already built the version of yourself that cannot be replaced. So now they're stuck with the one truth they never wanted to face. You were not lucky. You were not reckless. You were not guessing. You were simply operating on a level they were never trained to recognize. They always assumed you were simple to read. Someone who acted on emotion. Someone who reacted the moment pressure hit. Someone who softened when the room got too loud. or the path got too uncertain. They thought you were built like the rest of them, predictable, shaky, waiting for someone to tell you what to do next. And that's exactly why your rise feels like a deep shift to them, because while they were busy misreading you, your real strength was maturing in silence. Your patience sharpened itself. Your instinct trained itself. Your mind built a strategy so quietly that even you did not realize how far you'd evolved until the moment required it. And that moment? Oh, it pressed into their awareness stronger than expected. Their shortcuts, their assumptions, their certainty, their belief that you could be predicted, boxed in, limited, or controlled. They relied on the version of you they remember, not the version of you standing here now. They memorized your old patterns, completely unaware you've outgrown every single one. That's why your move pressed deeper into their awareness than the truth itself. Because the game they thought you were playing, you outgrew that board months ago, while they were busy preparing counterattacks. You built an entirely new dimension to operate from, and they have zero access to it. They don't understand how you saw things forming before they appeared. They don't understand how you stayed calm when everything looked chaotic from the outside. They don't understand how your silence held more authority than their loudest warnings. They don't understand why the doors they tried to shut suddenly opened anyway. They don't understand why you walked into opportunities they swear did not exist yesterday. They don't understand why you did not fold, did not fear, did not flinch. They're trying to analyze it logically. But your evolution has nothing to do with logic. It's inner expansion. It's emotional mastery. It's written in the parts of you that pressure tried to erase but ended up activating instead. And now, every step you take feels calculated to them, even when you're just moving naturally. Every decision you make looks advanced to them, even when it's simply instinct. Every win you secure feels unreal to them, even though it's the result of years of internal preparation they never saw. They don't realize your intuition strengthened long before your circumstances did. They don't realize your sensitivity became your guidance. They don't realize your pain became your compass. They don't realize your silence became your amplifier. They don't realize your setbacks became your training grounds. That's why the move you made left them speechless. It wasn't chance. It wasn't randomness. It wasn't coincidence. It was the moment when all of your unspoken battles aligned with perfect timing. When your inner world finally unfolded into your outer reality. When the version of you that nobody believed in finally stepped forward and took the lead. And when that version shows up, the whole environment adjusts. Because you don't just play a better game. You redefine the rules without announcing anything. They keep replaying it in their minds, trying to understand how you pulled off something they labeled impossible. That's what's unsettling them the most. Not the outcome, not the result, not even the surprise. It's the fact that you made a move they believed you weren't capable of. A move they didn't even think existed in the scenario. They studied your old patterns, your old fears, your old limits. They memorized the outdated version of you, like it was a textbook. But you evolved in ways they didn't track, in directions they didn't predict, and in dimensions they didn't believe in. You didn't break the rules. You expanded the field. You didn't step around the system. You outgrew it entirely. And that's exactly why everything they planned ended up dissolving effortlessly in your hands. Understand this. You didn't just do better. You didn't just surprise them. You shifted the core of how they measure capability. You executed a move so unexpected that it rewrote the image they had of you, permanently. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't warn anyone. You simply stepped into the version of yourself that was quietly forming through pain, patience, and every moment they underestimated you. And the second you acted from that upgraded self, the entire room recalibrated. They felt that shift in their awareness. They felt it in the air. They felt it in the energy that suddenly was not predictable anymore. Because the moment you made the unlikely move, they realized they weren't dealing with who they thought they were dealing with. And now look at them, sorting through old conversations, trying to remember if they missed a sign, reviewing your past like analysts searching for clues, asking themselves when you learned what they never learned, wondering who guided you, who refined you, who shaped you. They can't accept that the answer is simple. It was you. You trained you. Life trained you. Silence trained you. Experience reshaped you. Every setback strengthened you. Every disappointment sharpened your insight. They're trying to solve you like a puzzle, not realizing you're no longer made of pieces. You're made of clarity now, and clarity does not fit inside any pattern. That's the part that unsettles them most. They can't follow you. They can't predict you. They can't categorize you. And they definitely can't simplify you. Because the move you made wasn't just a step, it was a message, a declaration, a quiet announcement that you're operating from a higher frequency now. A frequency where hesitation fades, where old limits dissolve, where old identities shed, where your future finally stops waiting and begins unfolding. They don't understand how you reached this level. They don't understand how you made the transition. They don't understand how everything suddenly aligns for you. But deep down, a part of them knows. Because people who underestimate you always sense the shift before they admit the truth. And the truth is simple. You didn't become someone new. You finally became someone they were not prepared to meet. The moment you made that move, the one they swore was unrealistic, something changed inside their confidence. You could see it in their posture. You could feel it in the sudden quiet. It was like the whole room remembered you were never meant to stay where they placed you. That's the thing about people who judge you based on old versions of yourself. They forget that evolution is silent. They forget that growth doesn't announce itself. They forget that you don't owe anyone a public notice when you level up. So when you executed the move, they didn't expect the move they didn't even think you had the clarity or vision to attempt. Their entire strategy collapsed under its own illusions. And that collapse? It was overdue. You want to know the part that shifted them the hardest? You didn't force anything. You didn't brag. You didn't pressure anyone. You didn't even react loudly. You carried out the move they thought you couldn't do, with the same calm someone uses when closing a book. That effortless energy, that is what unsettles them. They wanted your rise to look chaotic. They wanted your progress to look accidental. They wanted your elevation to arrive with noise they could dismiss. But instead, you moved like someone who has been ready for years. Someone who's been quietly stacking clarity, discipline, insight, while everyone around you was busy doubting. And now they're facing a version of you that makes them uneasy, not because you're loud, but because you're exact. You do things with precision now. You see layers they don't see. You detect motives before they speak. You interpret situations in moments while they still need explanations. Your mind has outgrown their understanding, and your timing has outgrown their pace. When you made that refined move, you didn't just win, you revealed the gap between their imagination and your reality, the gap between who they thought you were and who you actually became, the gap between their expectations and your alignment. That's why they're quiet now. That is why they're confused, now reviewing every memory like analysts revisiting footage of something they can't categorize. They're not trying to understand the move itself. They're trying to understand you. They want to know how someone who faced so much walked out sharper, clearer, more stable. They want to know how someone they assumed would hesitate became the one rewriting the entire structure. They want to know how a person they labeled as ordinary turned out to be the unexpected variable the universe was waiting to reveal. But here's the truth. They'll never find the answer. Because the transformation was internal. The courage was internal. The clarity was internal. They can dig through your past, analyze your patterns, dissect your reactions, but they will never locate the moment you realize something powerful. You were never limited by their expectations. You were only limited by the size of your own belief. And once that expanded, everything shifted, everything aligned, everything unlocked. The truth is undeniable now. You're not just ahead, you're operating from a level they don't even have access to. And once someone reaches that level, no one can predict them, contain them, or narrow them down. They're still trying to understand it, going over the moment in their head like maybe they missed a clue. They keep asking themselves, how did you pull that off? How did you do what no one else attempted? But they'll never admit the real reason out loud, because it exposes the truth they never wanted to face, the truth that when you stopped listening to their limits, you became limitless. And that realization unsettles them in ways they will never confess. When you made that refined move, you didn't just shift the dynamic, you shifted them. Suddenly the person they tried to underestimate became the one setting the pace. The one they expected to stall became the one choosing the structure. The one they labeled forgettable became the one whose presence reorganizes the entire environment. And now they're sitting with the after effect, that quiet pause, that inner restlessness, that unspoken realization that they never fully understood who they were dealing with. They saw moments, but not your development. They saw patience, but not your inner strength. And now the truth stands in front of them, louder than anything you could have said. Understand this. People do not fear your progress. They fear what your progress reveals about their judgment. It's not that you proved them wrong. It's that you proved their vision small. Every forecast they made dissolved the second you stepped into the version of yourself they never believed existed. You weren't supposed to be the one who continued. You weren't supposed to be the one who refined. You weren't supposed to be the one who grew beyond the frame they placed you in. But you did. And not in a loud way. In a way that was too clean, too calm, too precise for their minds to process. Your rise didn't advertise itself. It unfolded. And that subtle unfolding carries more force than any announcement. What they're struggling with now is simple. You're not reacting the way you used to. You're not chasing approval. You're not explaining yourself. You're not performing for anyone's acceptance. Your silence became your method. Your stillness became your stability. Your calm became your communication. And nothing disrupts insecure people more than someone who doesn't need to prove anything at all. You became a mirror now. Every flaw they hid shows on them. Every doubt they projected returns to them. Every illusion they built collapses when you enter the room with that quiet, undeniable certainty of someone who finally knows their own power. And here's the part they will never recover from. You didn't do it for them. You elevated for yourself. You reshaped for yourself. You committed to your growth for yourself. You strengthened yourself for you. Their doubt was background noise. But your evolution was the true signal, a wavelength they can't reach, a level they can't interpret, a space they can't function in. You are not ahead because of them. You are ahead in spite of them. And that truth alone rewrites your entire story. Let this settle in their minds. The unspoken realization sitting heavy in their silence. You were never meant to match their expectations. You were built to rise past them. Every move they overlooked became the move that shaped you. Every limitation they tossed became the material that uplifted you. You transformed into the version of yourself you always knew was possible. And now they're only beginning to understand that. Their confusion is loud. Your victory is quiet. And that quiet confidence, that is how the world knows you already won. And here's the twist they never prepared for. The move they called impossible wasn't luck, impulse, or some sudden stroke of magic. It was you finally stepping into the version of yourself you kept hidden from the world. The version that watches quietly, learns quickly, moves deliberately. You didn't surprise them because you changed overnight. You surprised them because they never paid attention. While they were busy calculating your limits, you were busy strengthening every weakness into a tool. While they whispered doubts, you were gathering data. While they tried to push you into predictable patterns, you were studying their every flaw, every blind spot, every assumption that made them feel comfortable, underestimating you. So when you finally made that move they said was impossible. It wasn't chaos, it was precision. And precision is always underestimated until it drops the entire room into silence. The truth is, people don't fear your growth. They fear the moment your growth exposes the fact that they never grew themselves. You didn't outrun them. You didn't overpower them. You simply out-evolved them. And evolution is relentless to anyone who refuses to adapt. Look at them now, replaying every moment, every conversation, every time they misread you. It's almost poetic. They thought they were mapping your potential, but all they did was map the limits of their imagination. You didn't fit their storyline because their storyline was too small for the kind of person you were becoming. They kept expecting the old you to show up. Then you showed up as a version they had no file for, no data for, no defenses against. And that's when everything shifted. They see it now, that calm you walk with, that clarity in your eyes, that quiet confidence that doesn't need validation or noise. They finally understand what your silence meant. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was the sound of someone who already figured out their next 10 moves long before anyone else realized the game had changed. Your silence wasn't empty. It was filled with strategy, filled with awareness, filled with a level of self-control they didn't believe you possessed. And now they're rushing because your silence didn't just win. It caught them unprepared. It exposed every weakness in their approach. It revealed every place where they relied on you staying small, predictable, manageable. When you didn't fall apart, Their entire plan did. And here's the part that will echo in their minds for years. You didn't even use your full strength. You didn't flex. You didn't shout. You didn't force anything. You simply moved differently, saw differently, responded differently. You operated from a level where their tricks, doubts, and mind games couldn't reach you. You rose so quietly that they didn't even notice the altitude until they were looking up from the ground. They assumed you'd always stand on. That's why they're speechless. That's why they're stunned. Because the moment they thought you had no moves left was the exact moment you realized you already won. So let them wonder. Let them replay it. Let them search for explanations. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them closure. Your evolution is the only answer they'll ever get. And your victory, the quiet, calculated, undeniable victory, is the only reminder they'll ever need of who you truly are, the one they counted out, the one they misread, the one they never saw coming, until it was already too late.